Good morning, afternoon, good evening. How you guys doing? I'm Chad, your gracious host here on CK Knife and Tool. Yes, I am tired. I've been up a long time. Went to bed a little late, got up around 4 a.m. For some odd reason. I woke up. Has that ever happened to you guys? You just wake up one day and just wake up in the middle of the night or something like that and just can't fall back to sleep again? You know you're tired, you feel you're tired, but your mind is just going or something's just keeping you awake. That was today. So, I've been up since 4 a.m. and at the filming of this, it's almost noon. So, I already had lunch, drinking on my sweet tea here, and I'm working on knives. And what I wanted to do is touch base a little bit about where we left off. Let me set you guys down. Okay, so when we left off last, pardon me, I'm not sure if I think it was this knife here that we ended up doing the gluing up on the scales. And basically what I did to go through the process, use this or a kitchen knife, I can't remember. And I didn't bother going back, so, because again, I haven't had a lot of sleep, so. What I thought I would do is I would take you into the next steps on what I do when I'm shaping it. This is pretty much all glued up. This is, I normally, when I go through the process you've seen earlier in a previous video, and I can link it above over here, I let the epoxy set up for at least a day. So, you know, if I glue them up towards the evening on a Monday, I won't shape the knives until Wednesday. I just like to set it up. Now, within, I think, 5 or 6 hours, I could technically shape the knife and everything because the epoxy has set at that point, but I like it to be cured and completely ready to rock and roll. So for shaping and everything, so I wait 24-hour period of time or more. So what I did is I went ahead and waited on these. So now I'm going to prep the knife out and I'm going to go ahead and start processing, take you through the process of how I do the scales. And simply as you see, the pins are longer. I always do that. I always cut, you know, 3/4 of an inch or an inch to pin. Usually it's about an inch, and I just cut a bunch of them. I get them in a big stick. I cut them all 1-inch lengths. I put them in a container, so when I need them, I grab them, whether it's for a Jasper or a Montana or Rogue. They're all the right length. So, but you know, I do have some cut off there, which is probably not a great thing to do because you know it's a waste, but it's efficiency just to be able to grab and go. I'm going to take this to the bandsaw. I'm going to cut those 2 little pieces off. And then I'm going to go ahead, well first I'll actually tape the blade off. And I use blue painter's tape that works the best. It comes off easy, but it stays on well as I'm cleaning, as I'm shaping and cleaning the knife. It'll protect the flats. So I'll tape these off. I'm going to cut these pins. And then we're going to take it over to Frankenstein. And I'm going to start cleaning it all up and shaping them. So let's get going. Okay, there we have it. We have it all shaped roughly off the grinder, and I'll show you what this looks like. So you can see, this is all 120. Everything on this is 120 now, and it's got a really nice shape. It's really starting to take to its final shape here. The Jaspers, they keep a flatter profile because they're meant to be a really thin, lightweight knife, but still gives you something to grab onto rather than being skeletonized. Now, the scales will be about 1/4 inch. I usually start with micarta. This bolster material here, this gemstone, was about 1/4 inch, or yeah, I think it was just around 1/4 inch or 5/16 thick. And I did the same thing. I matched the Coco Bolo with that. So now that I have both the top shaped across the spine and the tang, and I have the belly done, I usually will go ahead and I'll hit the knife. I'll put the knife in the bench vise. And I'll hit it with 120 and 220 strip sanding paper. And that's the sanding paper I'm talking about right here. You can get it. It's 1 inch wide and 50 feet long. And this is 120 and this is 220. I've had this for the better part of a year. I rarely use the 220 this way. I usually use 120 And then I'll do the hand sanding with sheets like this using this type of sandpaper. Now this is wood sandpaper. This is just wood sandpaper. This is just a dry type sandpaper. I think this is 220 or 120. These sandpapers over here are all my wet dry that I use for hand sanding all the metal, all the blades. But I will use this to shape my scales because I will go across the metal tang as well as the belly of the tang when using it. It's only afterwards I might use just the wood sandpaper, that's wood only. I might use that, but most of the time I always finish my scales off with this because I have wood and metal mix. And the metal, let me get you down here. The metal sandpaper, the wet dry sandpaper, can be used on wood as well as metal, but because it holds up better and it seems like it cuts better into the metal when you're hand sanding, if I use wood only or the dry sandpaper, it seems like I remove material, the scales, but then the pins end up protruding more. So I try to keep an even balance, and that's really key, is making sure you're not sanding too much of your wood or your micarta or your G10 and not enough of your metal. You don't want to have that stepping up. You don't want the metal to protrude above the tang. Hopefully you understand that part. I'm explaining that properly. But I'm going to go ahead, this is 120, so I'm going to go ahead and start this again with 120 just to clean this up a little bit. But I'm not going to use the strip because this is pretty much broke down to what I want. Now it's just a matter of just softening it all up. And I'm going to do 120, and then I'm going to go to 220, and then 400, and I'll be sanding this all down to 400. Also, the other thing I'll do is I'm going to touch on it. I could probably do it now, and I'll show you. When you have tube pins like this, you don't want to leave them flat. I learned that you want to neck those down. So I actually bought this from, I think I got that from Tacoma Screw when I did a video a while back with it. It's a reamer, and I just put it inside my cordless DeWalt here. It was meant for I think a drill press, but I put it on here, and then I'll just, I'll show you what I do here. I just take this, and I just run it in here for a few seconds, and I ream that out to taper it. Seeing how that softens that up now. So you can see on this side, see how it's flat? There's epoxy in it right now, but you see how it's flat like that. See how that's flat and really produced, and now you get that chamfered edge there, which gives it a nice little look. You get a little shine on it. And this will all sand down then. So I'm going to do this to all three of them. So I've got those all cleaned up right there. I got them all good. I'm just going to get a file, or what I normally do is I get a drill bit and I put it in my drill press over here. I'll put it in my Kydex drill press here, and I think it's an 11/64 that fits within the 1/4 inch pin. And I will just go ahead and ream this out. Let's see, 11/64. Yep, that's the one. So I'll use an 11/64 bit. I'll put it inside the Wen drill press here, just clean out these, and then I use sanding paper, and I'll get the wet dry sanding paper, usually 220, and I'll take the 220 sandpaper, I'll wrap it around a file with a little WD-40, and then I'll spin the knife on that, but I'll show you guys that in a second. Now real quickly, I use a little piece of leather. I just cut a piece of scrap leather. It's pretty soft now, and that's what I cut my sheets to. So this way it gives me something to put in my hand as I'm applying an even pressure. Just like this. Now one of the things you want to be concerned about is I'm dealing with several different materials here, and it gets to be very problematic if you're not used to dealing with the knives. First we have our hardened steel across here. You know, we have the tang of our knife. Then I'm using a wood that is very hard, cocoa bolo being a very dense, having a high Janka rating. This is hard. So I have my steel that's harder than my wood, but my wood is actually harder than my gemstone, my bolster material. Bolster material is quite soft in relation to everything else that's here. So you have to make sure you're applying even pressure across the entire thing, but you don't want to spend too much time in one spot on your gemstone because you'll actually sand down your gemstone and it'll be uneven. and then you'll be able to feel that. You'll feel those ripples going across your tang. So that's another reason why it's important to use this. Otherwise, what I will do is later I'll fold this sandpaper in half and then I'll sand it this way, but I won't use a lot of heavy pressure. But you just want to make sure that you keep a light, even pressure across this, and make sure you're applying evenly all the way around. And then once I get into here, you want to make sure, because you can dig in pretty harshly by doing something like this and digging into the wood. So that's where I'll start using this, or as much as I won't even touch that with 120. In here, I'll use 220 only. But right now I'm just going to try to soften up the part right here and the part right here, and it'll come off pretty easy and it'll soften up pretty quickly. And then I'm going to move on to my 220. Now really quick, I'm going to go ahead and I got this all down, 220 I started hitting this down, but now I got to do the spine as well as the belly and the back of the knife at the end of the tang there. But before I did that, I wanted to show you, you're familiar with what I'm using, these small contact wheels, and they're made out of stainless steel and they hold up pretty good. And this is what one of them looks like. So I was going to do 220, but then I got to thinking I want to show you this first. So this is the regular contact wheel. This is the holder for it, and this is a finger wheel or a contact wheel. Now, as you can see, it's a solid metal, and it's got a shaft going through its all machine. It's got these bearings. But the kicker is when you start going to 220 and 400 grits and higher, the belts are so thin, and it's such a fine grit that the seam from the belts, this part right here, okay, it sometimes has a tendency of causing a little bit of a clicking sound, like a tick, 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 tick. Every time that seam hits the metal, it makes a bump. That bump transfers to the tang of the knife. So if I was to use this wheel in a finer paper like 220 and 400, it could have a tendency of getting little bumps across this, little hiccups across there. So I grit one of these instead. It's the same kind, but it actually is coated in rubber. And this will fit perfectly within the finger part of the groove right here. This little, where your finger comes down in there. The rubber will fit in here. I don't have but a couple of these in 2 different sizes, so I can only use it for certain knives. The rest of the time I have to be really diligent and soft and apply just the amount of pressure to work the belly through the belt and the grits. And then anything after that I have to do by hand. So I'm going to clean this up with 220 and I'll get back to you. Okay, now for a little trick of the trade. Got some sandpaper here, and I just cut a really thin strip. It's, you know, I mean, it's maybe a ½ inch strip, something like that. And then I get WD-40 on it. That's what's in this can. If you guys follow the channel, you know that's where I get my WD-40 from when I'm hand sanding. But I put a little WD-40 on the sandpaper, and I got a little 1/8 inch file here. And I just roll this on the 1/8 inch file to get it nice and tight. Just like this. And then that's big enough to fit in the tube, the nickel silver tube that we have here. And I just slowly twist and work it in there. I haven't found a file that fits it, plus a lot of the files are pretty aggressive, and you don't want it to be that aggressive. So once it's started, I just kind of chill and do this. Yeah, you just kind of spin it around. And the WD-40 helps lubricate it. And as you can see, it's starting to get the rest of the epoxy out and clean that up a little bit more. So it's pretty cool. And then I just keep doing this until I work it through. And it'll get smoother and smoother. And if anything, I'll just swap out another piece of sanding paper. And just keep doing that. And then before you know it, you get there's a little bit of gunk in there still, but you get the idea. You get a pretty clean lanyard tube. So now everything's down to 400 grit, and I am just getting some acetone here, and I'm cleaning off the scales. One of the things about Cocobolo, not this Cocobolo, but some of the higher grade Cocobolos, they're very, very oily, and they don't mix well with other materials. Meaning, as you're sanding the Cocobolo oils bleed over into something else. I had someone ask, they wanted to do white liners on a knife with Cocobolo. And I said, I can't do that. That oil in the Cocobolo will get into that white liner, and just start staining it. And as I hand sand, as I'm doing this, even just the 400 grit hand sanding and finishing it up, you'll still get that white, that bleed in from the cocobolo oils will get into that white, and it's not worth the risk and the headache for me. So so I steered him away from that. But his knife turned out good. So now what it is, cleaned it out with acetone, and after that, it's another little secret, and then we're going to finish up this video. And that is True Oil. Now, because of the fact I have cocobolo, which is a pretty hard wood, doesn't need to be stabilized or anything, I actually will use cocobolo as in Texas ironwood and kingwood, Mexican kingwoods and stuff like that. I actually will take the oils like True Oil, and sometimes it crystallizes. True Oil is what they use for gun stocks. They'll put those on the top of, you know, wood gun stocks and everything like that. I'll use the True Oil. It's made by Birchwood Casey. Link in the description down below. And I will just use the little toothpick because I got to break it up sometimes. It crystallizes. And I'll apply it like that. And then I just use my finger. It's dull right here, and then here it gets all wet. And it gets a nice shiny look to it. So I'll do this. Actually, I'm going to take the... I'm done sanding everything, and I like to remove the tape near the ricasa of the knife, because if you don't and you apply oils and such, they have a tendency of hiding at the tape line, and then you have these marks and everything. So I'm just going to take that off, as well as this piece here. There we go. So that gives me something to hold on to right there, but yeah, the knife isn't in any need of being damaged, but or concerned about being damaged. But right now, I'm just going to apply this Birchwood KC True Oil all over the tank. Get it on top of the shoulders, get it up in the belly here, apply it around the back of the spine, and you can see how pretty that makes it look. It gives it just a really nice look to it. And then I'll use the clean part of the towel, just wipe off the excess. You want to get into the oil here on the shoulders. Just clean off the excess oil. You don't need a lot to apply because you're just going to wipe it down, but you want it to get in there good. And then just make sure you're cleaning the knife off. If you get a little staining like you might see on this, something that goes on it, that can be cleaned off later. There's always a little bit of residue or something that gets on the blade. But there we go. That is cleaned up. And that's looking good. I mean, that is looking nice. Look at that, guys. That is pretty. Huh? Black liners, really nice turquoise looking bolsters. Cocobolo cleans up good. That's a pretty knife. That's going to look good as a set. Sweet. I'll put it over here. I put it up in my Kydex press here, just like that. I just leave it over here like this, and it'll dry for a day. You leave it sit for 24 hours. And then come back tomorrow, wipe it down, apply a second coat, take off the excess, put it back again, do that. I do that 3 times, and then it's all ready to rock and roll. But I will not be doing the second or third coat because I am going to do the sheath next. And I normally do this treatment after I've made the Kydex sheath and have finished everything there. But I wanted to wrap up this video to show you what you could do for the scales. So again, sorry guys. Thank you for your patience. I hope the video isn't going to be too long, but I wanted to share this with you all because I've had some people ask questions in the past and sending me messages. So, again, do appreciate all the support. Like, share, subscribe, all the good stuff. You know what to do to keep me from the bottom of the YouTube bucket. I'm going to take my tea, go up to the house, and try to take a nap. We'll catch you guys later. Bye.